Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show. Discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Hello, welcome one and all. It is time for the Books That Make You show. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy. And today, we're talking about books that make you remember moonlighting. Yeah, once upon a time, television was actually worth watching because of groundbreaking shows like Moonlighting. Now, for those of you who remember, this was a show that was must watch. It featured the elegant and iconic Cybil Shepherd opposite a baby-faced, and he had hair then, Bruce Willis. This was before Die Hard. And actually, I think this was the show that pretty much catapulted his career. Now, behind the scenes, there were writers and producers and showrunners and actors, and they made this show happen despite the odds. Our guest today is our friend, Scott Ryan. He is the author of the book, Moonlighting, an Oral History. He's a TV historian, a pop culture expert, as well as a publisher, a writer, and we've had him on the show before. And he also has the books 30-something at 30, an Oral History, as well as the Last Days of Letterman, and now Moonlighting, an Oral History. He's also the co-publisher at Fayetteville Mafia Press and the managing editor at the Blue Rose magazine, and the director of A Voyage to Twin Peaks, as well as the host of the Red Room podcast. Hi, Scott. Welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. It's fun to be back.
I am excited to have you back because we are now talking about Moonlighting, an oral history. It is out. It has been unleashed to the masses. And I want to start with just taking this step back because it's the show has such sticking power. As a matter of fact, for the last 2 weeks, I've had the theme song stuck in my head because I Googled it and then the theme song came up by El Giro and I started listening to it and now it won't go away. But that's indicative of what this show was. It just had such staying power. It still resonates with us today. Why do you think that is?
I think it was the theme song. It was all Al Giro. He did it all. You know what's funny about the Al Giro thing? And I'm going to be completely honest. The book was done. It hadn't been turned into the printer, but I was done and just about to turn it in. And somebody tweeted, I can't believe there's going to be a book about moonlighting. I can't wait to find out about the theme song. And then I went, I don't remember writing about the theme song. Certainly I did. So I did a Google search in the document for Al Giro. Nothing. Zero. And I panicked. So I emailed Glenn Gordon Caron, who is the creator, and Jay Daniel, who was the producer. And I said, please give me something on Al Giro. And they did. And then I had to delete a picture to get it in that page. And I dumped in. Do you know how embarrassing it would have been if this book would have come out? I didn't mean to do it. It slipped my mind. And that theme song really and truly matters. If you Google on Twitter, Moonlighting, you'll always see someone listening to the Al Giro song, Moonlighting. Thank the Lord, there is a story. And it's a great story that I had never heard before. Last thing that got in the book.
Oh, I love it. I love it. But you're absolutely right. That's exactly what I was doing. I was Googling and it came up and I was like, and all of a sudden it was like an epiphany. I was like, oh, I remember that song. Up until then, it's not like I forgot, but it just wasn't at top of mind. So
right.
That's so cool.
And it was funny because one of my favorite things Glenn said about it was that he was at the studio when they were recording it. And he said he saw the lyrics first. And he looked down and he said, they made no sense. And he didn't like it. And he thought, what am I going to do here? And then when he heard Al get in the booth and start singing with the music, he said it was moonlighting. But, I never really thought about, some walk by day, some fly by night. I mean, what are they even saying? But for some reason, it's moonlighting.
Yeah, yeah. So can you tell people who may not remember Moonlighting as well as we do. As well as, let's face it, I brought up the book to a couple of millennials not too long ago, and they were like, huh, what? Bruce Willis did what? Can you give us the rundown and tell us what the show is all about?
Sure. So it came out in 1985, and in 1985, the most important type of television was the detective series. Every show was a detective series. You had Magnum, you'd have Rockford Files, you have Murder, She Wrote, Heart to Heart, Remington Steele. I mean, that was the big thing. So Glenn wanted to get in this game, but he really didn't care about doing a detective show. In fact, he felt that really a detective would probably not be the most moral, upstanding person. And that's how they were depicted on TV. So Moonlighting is a detective show that is not a detective show at all. The cases couldn't be less important. They're silly. They oftentimes don't solve them. They'll just tell you who did it, and then they start running around and throwing pies in everyone's faces. So it was a very silly show that really was a screwball 1940s romantic comedy. What you wanted was Maddie Hayes, Sybil Shepherd, to fall in love with David Addison, Bruce Willis. That was what it really is. It's just hidden inside this fake detective series.
They had so much chemistry between them, and I think that's part of what made the show. But as we know when we read your book, and let's face it, there was lots of rumors, there was lots of chatter going on back at the time, because behind the scenes, there was chaos, there was a lot of stuff going on, and it almost seems like it's a miracle that a lot of the episodes actually were made. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
You are so right. And I knew a little bit about it because I was a fan and I watched it when it was on, but I was pretty young then. I was 15 when it came out. So, I wasn't like combing the National Enquirer as a 15-year-old. Had I, that would have been kind of scary, actually. But yeah, it's weird because when everybody who interviews me wants to talk about if Bruce and Sybil hated each other. And that is exactly what was going on in the 80s. And I find that so fascinating that 35 years later, that's still what everyone wants to know. And the book is full of stories of them, let's say, not maybe getting along to the greatest degree. But I don't think they hated each other. And I might be the only one who thinks that. I think it was such a pressure cooker situation. I always say everything I learned in life, I learned by running the drive-thru at Arby's. And when you're running that drive-thru and you need some curly fries because the cars are backed up, you're bound to yell at that person and say, I need those curly fries. It doesn't mean you hate that person. So this is on a much bigger scale than my curly fry metaphor, which I stand behind. I think it was so pressure packed that they were bound to fight. There was bound to be troubles because they were working one time 36 straight hours. I mean, if I ran the drive-thru for 36 straight hours, who knows what I'd have been handing out in that bag.
No, I take it you actually did run the drive-thru at Arby's?
Still my all-time favorite job. Yeah. My all-time favorite job. I keep telling my wife, that's where I'm going to end up at the end of this. First job was Arby's. I'd like it to be the last job. 85-year-old Scott running the drive-thru.
Oh, I love it. But that's true. That's a great analogy because when you're in that situation, those freaking curly fries are the most important thing to you. And if you step back from it, you realize, oh, we were just in the moment at the times and everything. And yeah, I mean, according to your book and according to, chit-chatting with you a little bit, there were shows that they were writing the shows right before they were walking onto the set. Is that right?
Of course, not just some of the shows, virtually every single episode. Even the first episode, now the pilot they did have, the pilot has to go through a pilot situation, but even the very first hour episode, they did not have a script to because ABC loved the pilot so much that the turnaround time was quick. And Jay points that out, who was the executive producer of the show, that from the beginning, they started behind. Typical script back in 85 for a TV show might have been 40 to 45 pages. The shortest Moonlighting script was 85 pages. because they talked at the same time. They talked fast. It's, when you watch it now, it feels like a show now. That's how quick the dialogue goes. But that isn't what TV was doing back then. So it took them a long time to do these shows.
I do remember that snappy dialogue. It was unlike anything else that was out there. You had the soap operas at the time and everything was just kind of long and maudling. Do you think that snappy dialogue and perhaps other things too influenced future TV shows? What kind of legacy did Moonlighting create?
Well, it's not even what I think. The people that I interviewed said they honestly believe they influenced HBO. Because if you look at what HBO was really that first thing that took on the networks, today it would be Netflix. But back then, HBO was just coming out and they were only doing 10 to 13 episodes a year. Mm-hmm. That's about what Moonlighting did. Network shows were honestly doing like 26. I mean, sometimes it's crazy. If you look at what a show like Night Court or Three's Company was doing, they were doing way more than 22. That was what networks expected. Moonlighting, the most they ever did was 18, and that was the second season, and that's by a ton. Normally, they did about 15 a year. So they definitely influenced television.
Yeah, for the better. And what was it like, talking to the executive producers and the showrunners and everybody you interviewed in this book? It's an impressive list, to say the least.
Well, it's weird because in normal interviews, I pretend that this is what I do, but I can't lie to you. It freaks me out. It's crazy that I'm in this position. I was just a fan. I made an episode of Moonlighting when I was 18 years old with my friends. Yes, there is an Arby's commercial in it. Arby's is the theme. We're sponsored today by Arby's.
Product placement, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I still get a check from them. I'm not gonna lie.
Get the residuals.
But so I'm a writer today because of Glenn Gordon Caron. There's no doubt about it. Everything that I've written has always had his irreverence, his view of comedy, but also the seriousness and the heart and the emotion. I write with emotion. I don't stand back and be critical of something. I'm right in there. My heart is in all of my books, but they also are funny. That all came from Moonlighting. So for me to get a call from Glenn Gordon Caron or Jay Daniel or Sybil Shepherd now just to talk, just to be friends with, that is the single craziest thing that has ever happened. And one time I mentioned running the drive-thru on a show.
And now you are BFFs with Sybil Shepherd, is that right?
Yes, Sybil and I are very close. We talk a lot. She is the sweetest person. She's, she knows what she did in Moonlighting. She doesn't take away what anybody says in this book. But she's not that person anymore. I think, she even said, man, it was like being thrown in a cave. And she behaved as she behaved. They all did. And I say in the book, in the front and in the back, we got to forgive that behavior. Right now, we're living in a time where people don't like to forgive behavior. But if you grow and you change, that makes you a human being. And these are all human stories and human reactions to rough situations.
Oh, that's great advice. I really like that. You're absolutely right. I mean, who we were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, how long ago was this?
Yeah.
I'm not that person anymore either. And isn't that what storytelling does? All of our characters in storytelling have an arc and they change. So in reality, we have to accept that as well. Now, let me ask you this. If someone were to go back and just pick one episode of Moonlighting to go back and watch, to relive, which one would you recommend they go back to view?
Well, that's really tough for me because there are so many, and there's so many that are personal to me. But I have a friend who had to hear me blab about Moonlighting for the last 2 years, and she is young, and she's never seen an episode of Moonlighting. And my suggestion to her was the dream sequence Always Rings Twice, which is more known as the black and white episode. That was the Emmy magnet. In fact, Emmy Magazine in June is doing an excerpt of that episode. I think it was nominated for 17 Emmys, a lot of Emmys. And that episode is about an old case, and Maddie dreams her version of the case, and David dreams his version. And so you see the case in two ways. It's in black and white. There's music in it. It's so funny, so creative. It does encapsulate what is Moonlighting.
And that's the thing, too. They didn't follow that formula of you mentioned this earlier. There's a case, you got to solve it. They do their thing. They just went off on the most bizarre but entertaining tangents. And I remember my episode is the Taming of the Shrew episode, because coincidentally, at the time, way back then, I was actually reading Shakespeare, The Taming of the Shrew. And when that came out, I was like, oh my gosh, I suddenly now like this play. It made sense. And the way they did it was just so fabulous. And as I understand, that was one of those episodes that barely got made as well, right?
Yeah, that episode is utterly ridiculous that it exists in this world. From the day that someone, said we're going to do this, to the day that it was on my television screen in little old Massillon, Ohio, was 18 days. From concept to me seeing it. Now, this is a show that you had to get wardrobe. No sets are in the series because it's set in, Shakespearean times. The biggest cast the show would ever have, and the entire script is in iambic pentameter. And they did it in 18 days. It was also the most expensive hour of television ever produced up to that point. And in today's dollars, equaled an episode of Game of Thrones.
Wow. That I didn't realize. That's amazing. So when writing this book, let's talk a little bit nuts and bolts about actually writing this book. What do you want readers to walk away with? What do you want them to get out of it?
Well, to me, there's always a question that starts a book for me. Each one of my books started because I had a question. And my overall question for Moonlighting is, why isn't there TV like this today? You mentioned back then there was a reason to watch TV. And, there almost wasn't a reason to watch TV in the 80s. It's honestly pretty boring television. It's not really it was popular, but I wouldn't say it was overly creative. And out of this just very average network TV comes this show that 1 week is a Shakespeare episode. 1 week is a black and white episode. 1 week they do a 7.5-minute ballet to tell stories. Like, why doesn't this happen now when we're living in this golden age of Netflix budgets that go on forever? And I wanted to understand that. I wanted to say, how did this show happen? I guess it's up to readers to decide how it really happened. There are a couple different reasons. To me, Glenn Gordon Caron slipped in at this one brief intersection of corporate commerce and art. So people were deciding, network executives, that they could make more money if they own the show and broadcast the show, which, by the way, was illegal because that's a monopoly. So there was a law that saying a network couldn't own the show and broadcast it. But Ronald Reagan was president, and they figured he's not going to bust us out on this. They felt that it was the right time to try this. So this was the first or second show. I think ABC did try another show. It just didn't make it out. And I think NBC was doing this with Punky Brewster, which also was probably not the most creative show. Nothing against Punky. I watched Punky, but
I love Punky. Hey,
but it was pretty much a sitcom, But Glenn had the entire budget of ABC. And they needed to get this out because this was their company. So they were giving him all this time. And Glenn said if he didn't know what to write, he just waited. And so the crew waited and the actors waited and everyone waited. That wouldn't happen today. But I think it was just this brief little moment. And then, by the end of Moonlighting, they said, get out of here. Now we know how to do this and make, not spend this much money, but also make this much money.
Oh, there's just so much I want to unpack there. Okay, first of all, just this idea of when you're under pressure to write, and that's the moment, it's like you can't have writer's block. Do you feel that maybe that was why there was so much wild creativity? Because they had to put something down. And when you have to write, look what happens. Do you think
Well, I do think that is a big part of it. And the other part is Alan Arkish, who directed the most episodes of Moonlightings. This is his theory, not mine. He said he thinks Glenn created or grasped that control by not writing. So here you've got this network. They've dumped this money into this company called ABC Circle Films to do this project. And then you got this 29-year-old creative person that has the keys to it all. And they couldn't tell him no. What were they going to do? They were waiting for the episodes, and he was doing it that way. And once it hit the air, people were loving it, and the ratings were going up. So they couldn't censor him. There's some very controversial lines that David Addison says that people just were not making those jokes in the 80s. They got the episode Tuesday at 9 a.m. It's playing Tuesday at night. What are they going to do? They aired it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's Alan's theory on how Glenn got away with it.
And you, in writing this book, I want to segue back to that a little bit. You bring a lot of fairness and a lot of authenticity. Congratulations for you doing that and presenting the book. What was the most challenging part of writing Moonlighting, an oral history for you?
Well, I'm going to have back-to-back Alan Arkish answers. So if you've read my other books, they're extremely positive. That's sort of who I am as a person. It takes me, even if I have a lot of books out, people are like, how do you work this long? But it takes a lot of hours to work on a book. I would not spend that time to hurt someone's feelings. That would be a waste of time to me. So I really want things to be positive. So when I interviewed Alan Arkish, we talked for like 2.5 hours in the morning. And then he said, can we take a break? And we'll talk in another 2 hours. I said, sure. That whole morning, he was smiling. He was happy. He was telling the greatest stories. And we got up to the part where Dave and Maddie had sex. And then we took a break. When we came back, every story he had a frown on his face. He was a little grumpier. It was a little painful to talk about. And it was right then that I realized that I was going to have to be, as you said, fair. Like I couldn't hide the bad things. Bad things really did happen to good people on this show. And if I was going to tell the true history, I was going to have to tell the good, the happy, that 2.5 hours with Alan. But I had to tell those rough 2 hours in the afternoon. And that was the hardest part for me, was realizing, oh man, I'm going to have to hurt some feelings here. And so in the end of the book, I try to pull back and say, look, this is just what people remember. This is what happened. But also everyone is fine. Everyone's fine. Everyone went on to work again. Everyone is fine. So I don't know. For me, it was hard. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's the moment for me that was the hardest.
Yeah. No, that definitely answers the question. And who do you feel? I mean, the book is getting rave reviews. People love it. Who do you feel this book is mostly for? Is it for fans? Is it for aspiring writers? Is it a little bit of both and something else?
I think it's for everyone who has $25 in their bank account. For me, what I want it to be for is anyone who wants to write. Now, I get that that's a lofty goal. It's going to be hard to convince. Like, I would love for this book to be taught in a writing course, which I think might be a bit of a stretch for people. But Roger Director, Chick Igley, Karen Hall, Deborah Frank, Jeff Reno, Ron Osborne, they all went on to create art that you have enjoyed your entire life. They're names that, people may not know, but if you IMDb them, you're going to be like, what? I watched that show. I love that show. And they will tell you the blood, sweat, and tears it took them to create these shows. I didn't have to beg anyone to pour their heart out to me. I felt like all of them were waiting 30 years for me to call them. That being said, the book is going to sell to people who love Moonlighting. I mean, that's where it's going to go. And I'm getting that feedback from people saying, I love this show so much, because it is the first book ever done on Moonlighting, which is ridiculous. But I think fans of the show have been waiting for it.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is a must read by anybody who wants to be a writer, television writer. As well, let's go back and mention your other books too. We only touched on them a little bit, The Last Days of Letterman, as well as 30-something at 30. You really are positioning yourself as this 80s, 90s-ish pop culture TV historian. Is that kind of what we're going for here? The ability that you have to leave this legacy?
It's just sort of funny because I really do watch TV now. There are shows. I'm not stuck back there. But I think at that time period, certainly Letterman influenced me greatly in my life as an interviewer, as a comic. His sensibility, and 30-something, I honestly believe is the best written television show there ever was. I mean, there's just nothing like 30-something. So these are shows that when I was young and in college, they mattered to me. And I think when you're in that time period of your life, whatever art you consume there, whatever album you loved, whatever books you read, that sets you on your path for the rest of your life. And mostly, I mean, TV is reality TV now, which makes me want to vomit. We're not going to get to the bottom of the intricacies of the voice.
That's true. I'd be remiss, too, if I didn't throw Twin Peaks into the mix as well, because you have done so much with that show, and you have the podcast and the magazine. You want to talk just a little bit about that? Tell people what's going on there.
Yeah, and that's actually my next book. Strangely, with all my books, I've never written a book about Twin Peaks. So next year is the 30th anniversary of Fire Walk with Me, which is the Twin Peaks movie directed by David Lynch. And so I am working on that book now. It is not an oral history. I'm not ever doing another oral history unless a major studio comes and hires me. I mean, I am for hire, but they are so hard, and it's just so much pressure to get everyone and do all those interviews. I'm going to take a little break from that. But I do love Twin Peaks, and I do think that certainly changed all of television and, again, influenced me. It's a different kind of show. I wouldn't say it affected my heart like Moonlighting and 30-something did, because it's not that kind of show, but it opened the possibilities to what television could do.
Since you hate all television that's currently on the air, I'm going to ask you to pick the show that you hate the least. Is there anything? Come on, Scott. There's got to be something that...
There is. I don't hate everything that is on right now. I am quite a critic to it because I think that people have forgotten how to make television. I actually just did an appearance on another show, and I'm not going to do it again, but I criticized a show that's on right now, and I made Twitter hate me for a little bit. So I've learned my lesson. I do love Fargo right now. If I would do a book about a show that was on right now, it would be Fargo. Lodge 49, which came and went really fast, was great. And I think Ted Lasso on Apple Plus has my sensibility of kindness. So there are shows out there. It's just so hard right now.
Yeah. Well, the thing is there's so many shows right now. Everybody's so competitive with the streaming and network. And then you got other things getting thrown into the mix, Apple TV and everything. It's actually a great time to be a writer or somebody who's making television because there's so much content being created. So
and I'm actually developing a TV series as well. And I was recently in a meeting and I did tell them, look, I don't want anyone addicted to drugs. Nobody's an alcoholic. Like, stop it with the characters that hate their whole lives. That's the other part of now television that I just can't get behind. We're not all that miserable out here. Some of us are having a good time. We have good days and bad days. There's a swing to it.
Yeah. Well, it tends to be the easy shard of glass that we can give a character, right? Oh, they're a detective. Therefore, they're an alcoholic. It's kind of like it becomes cliche after a while. But you're right. In order to be inventive, think of something different. There's so many other problems that people can have, right?
Yeah. Right. They could be addicted to curly fries. We don't know.
Yes.
Why not that?
I love that. You need to put that into your script. That would be amazing.
No, because I'm trying to sell the script.
Oh, okay.
So
Gotcha. All right. Scott Ryan, tell everybody your details, where they can find out more about you, the show that you host, the books that you write. Where can people go?
So you can find me at scottryanproductions.com. My publishing company is Fayetteville Mafia Press.com. We have so many great, exciting books coming up over the next couple years. We just signed an Emmy-winning author writer from television that's going to do a book that I don't know that I'm allowed to announce yet, but we do have some very exciting books coming up. You can follow me on Twitter at Scott Luckstory.
Awesome. Scott Ryan, the author of Moonlighting, an oral history, plus many, many other books. There it is. Woo! Looks so much better than whatever the heck I drew back there. That's amazing.
It's very similar. I should have had this up here and we would have been the same.
Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You bet. And thank you, everybody, for being with us here today on the Books That Make You show. Please visit our website. It's booksthatmakeyou.com, and you can find us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and of course, YouTube, where you can subscribe to the show. Until next time, all of my bibliophiles, please enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.